For nearly 80,000 refugees, this makeshift city is home. A temporary fix for an overwhelming need, as war forced them to abandon their homes, possessions, jobs, and dreams. While it's hoped life here in the Zaatari camp is still only temporary, as the wars dragged on, refugees have tried to make a new life for themselves. Many people here haven't been able to work and rely on UN assistance of less than $30 a month. Some make a little extra through the camp's informal economy. Here the market sells everything from furniture to teapots to headscarves. And programs have also been set up that offer work inside the camp.
To me, it is very important to ensure that people go back to that normalcy of a human being, of being able to earn and to spend. Assistance is not really the normal way of living.
Anissa Gassam Fidel worked as a private tutor before fleeing Syria 5 years ago. Now she's a teacher as part of the camp's Cash for Work scheme.
When we first came here, I encountered a lot of difficulties. I came with my son alone and my husband came after 2 months. After that, we came here and we established ourselves step by step.
Anissa says passing knowledge on to the next generation is an important, fulfilling job.
When I found work and started working, I was very happy and I felt like I made things easier at home and removed a big burden, especially from my husband.
Adel Tukan is also part of the Cash for Work scheme. Today he's working as my guide. He says before this he had nothing to do with his time, and the boredom made him feel very low.
Thank God our household income is improved. Thank God the program is very good. It increases job opportunities for people after us. Every 6 months, new people are employed in the camp.
Last year, the government said it would create 200,000 jobs and made it easier for refugees and employers to apply for work permits. It also allowed for refugees living in camps to get them too. But so far, refugees have been slow to apply for them. Around 40,000 refugees now have permits to work in Jordan, but many thousands remain working in the shadows. With Jordan's sluggish economy and high unemployment, decent-paying jobs are limited. And officially, Syrians are only allowed to work in jobs open to foreigners. Abu Basil from Homs came to Jordan in 2013. In Syria, he was a photographer and owned his own shop. He says he took photos of his children every single day, but when he was forced to flee, he left everything behind. He says when he arrived in Jordan, UN assistance wasn't enough to get by.
So we worked, even if it was illegal, because we had no choice. I used to do one thing, but now I've tried many different jobs. I sold vegetables, I worked in the mall, I made water jugs.
Abu now works legally in a factory.
Before we got work permits, we were working under heavy stress. And after we got work permits, it was much simpler. We felt better about our work.
Abu says he would love to open his own photography business again, but says his dream now is just to make sure his 2 boys have a good life and education. It's a simple hope shared by many refugees living in Jordan. But as the strain of their host's economy deepens and their lives become more entrenched, that hope may be harder to hold on to. Yvette McCullough in Amman for the Newsmakers.
Let's talk more with our panel. Joining me now is Lewis Turner, who's a researcher at the University of London and recently spent a year in Jordan studying the Syria refugee response. Also on the program is the UNHCR's Marwa Hashim. She's in Amman, but also works out of the Zaatari refugee camp. Both of you, thank you very much for joining us. Marwa, if I can begin with you, how bad is the situation for Syrian refugees in Jordan?
There are around 650 registered with UNHCR Syrian refugees, The situation is, as they were going into the 7th year, the situation becomes, of course, protracted, and their economic situations becomes worse. However, with the opening of the work permits, as you've kindly mentioned in your report, and thanks to the Jordanian government, we are hoping that they will have more sustainable income and their situation would improve.
Okay, so that's a hope, Lewis. They can do some work now with these work permits. There is some formal labor for these Syrian refugees. Should we be giving credit where it's due and thanking and crediting the Jordanian government?
I think it's absolutely a positive step forward that Syrians can access some forms of employment, and certainly that gives them security, particularly in terms of the risk of being arrested for working without a permit or deported back to Syria. But I think we also have to make sure that the focus is not just on whether Syrians can access jobs, but whether they can access decent jobs that pay wages that can allow people to live in Jordan decently and that have proper working conditions that aren't exploitative.
Mm-hmm. So, Marwa, can they access decent jobs rather than just jobs as a whole?
There are certain sectors which are open, or areas that are open currently for the Syrian refugees, mainly in agriculture, construction, and wholesale trade and food processing. Of course, we are advocating for more areas to be open, but the mere fact that this has been opened is a positive step.
Lewis, tell me a bit more about those who have been deported, those who have been sent back. I mean, I remember reading stories about people who were sent back to places like Daraa and other places in Syria, which are, horrendous. There are no places to go back home to, right? Those who were deported, did they have due process from the Jordanian government? Was there a fair process before they were sent back?
No, largely not. People have been deported for several different categories of reasons, one of which is alleged security concerns, but the reports all say that there has been no due process or tribunal to determine whether those accusations are accurate. People have also been deported essentially as a punishment for working without a permit, and again that tends to happen very quickly without any appeal or due process. There have also been many instances where people have been sent from living in Jordan's towns and cities to refugee camps like Azraq, in which the conditions are particularly bad, again as a punishment for working without a permit.
Marwa, is that true? Is that what's happening from your perspective, that there is this sort of punishment towards the refugees from the Jordanian government?
But that's an interesting point, but then what would we... the Jordanian government has to secure its land, and we are advocating for all the cases in Jordan and for all the refugees to have a decent and safe life and dignity.
Okay, so Lewis, are you satisfied by that? Because the Jordanian government is worried about Daesh infiltration, for example, just across the border. As we mentioned, those car bombs went off, 6 people died in Rukban camp across the border. So firstly, do you acknowledge that they have valid security concerns? And as Marwa suggests, they have to secure their country, which means that some people have to be deported. Are you satisfied by that, Lewis?
I mean, I would certainly accept that there are some valid security concerns in maybe a small number of cases, but even in those cases, Syrian refugees are absolutely entitled to some sort of due process and tribunal to establish whether those security concerns are valid. What we hear from human rights groups and from aid agencies is that that is not what is taking place, but that people can be deported on the basis of rumours, on the basis essentially as punishments for their behaviour or political beliefs. So what's happening, it seems, is not correct due process to establish Jordan's security, which of course is important, but something quite different.
Okay, so Marwa, is there due process? Whether it's from the Jordanian government, from UNHCR, from all the factors, all the different players involved there in the camps, are these people going through a fair process?
UNHCR advocates, as I said before, UNHCR advocates for the rights of refugees and for the protection of refugees from any problems. And we are advocating with the government of Jordan for due process.
Do you believe, Marwa, that the Jordanian government is being fair or that they can do better?
The Jordanian government is bearing a lot of burden in general, and we have been working very successfully with the Jordanian government, and hosting a very big number of refugees is a big burden that a lot of countries should be sharing the burden of. And if we go back to the idea of the work permits and opening that for the refugees, it's a huge step.
Absolutely. So, granted, 1.3 million Syrian refugees in Jordan, 20% of the population. This is massive, right? It costs $2.5 billion per year. All granted. And the work permit news is good news, Marwa. But my question was, is the government being fair, and can it do better? Because we're seeing these situations where some people are not getting an opportunity to explain themselves, to say, hey, maybe I'm not who you think I am, don't send me away. So can they do better, Marwa?
Actually, as I said, we are working with the government to advocate for the protection of refugees.
Lewis, are you satisfied by that?
Well, I think that UNHCR is in a difficult position here. Obviously, it has to have a close working relationship with the Jordanian government. But I think, if I may, to answer your question directly, absolutely the Jordanian government can be doing better. It has to be praised and given credit where it implements good policies for refugees, where it affords protection and opportunities to work. But I think it's also important humanitarian agencies and the international community at large speak out when Jordan doesn't live up to standards or doesn't treat refugees living in Jordan with the rights and dignity that they deserve.
Let me ask you, Lewis, about what Mohammed Mo'man, the Minister of State for Media Affairs, said recently to the Jordanian press. He said, we stand on high moral ground when it comes to aiding refugees, and we hope the international community helps us shoulder this international responsibility. So I asked you if the Jordanians can do more. Lewis, can the international community do more, or are they throwing Jordan under the bus here and just making them carry the workload here?
Absolutely, the international community could be doing more and should be doing more. And in some ways, what Jordan is doing is remarkable in terms of the numbers of Syrian refugees, among refugees also of other nationalities that it hosts. And the international community and donor states in the EU and North America, their commitment to funding what's happening in Jordan and the response that's needed has been very poor. And their own offers of resettlement have also often been very poor. So, yeah, I appreciate totally that Jordan is in many ways doing more than most states are doing for Syrian refugees. But that, of course, doesn't mean that it couldn't be doing better, and that in some particular instances, like in cases of deportation, it has to be doing a lot better in order to protect what are really basic and vital human rights for Syrians.
Marwa Hashim, tell me, what is the difference between the very formal camps like Zaatari, it's massive, it's like a city in itself, and those informal ones that are on the border, and some of them also peppered along the Syrian border, where there doesn't seem to be much protection for the people? Tell me the difference between those.
For the camps in Jordan are managed and by the SRAD, which is the Syrian Refugee Authority, and is under the protection of the Jordanian government. And humanitarian agencies can work in the government in the camps along with the in the camps along with the government. The other camps are informal, as you've said, and they are not inside the country.
Okay, and that poses a whole host of problems. Is there a way, Marwa, to maybe get the international community, even though despite the risks, to get them to take control of those camps just across the border?
This is not on Jordanian land, I believe.
Okay. Lewis, let me ask you a final question. Jordan, like Lebanon and other countries in the region, have had refugees in refugee camps for generations. Ask the Palestinians, right? They are people who have been the children of refugees, the grandchildren of refugees. What's to guarantee that this won't happen to the Syrians and that 50 years from now we won't be talking about Zaatari refugee camp for Syrians?
I think there's no guarantee of that. I think it's perfectly possible, although obviously we would hope that Syrians will be able to return to their country safely and soon. It's absolutely possible that many Syrians will end up living in Jordan for the long term, and that there may still be Syrians living in Jordan in places like Zaatari in years, decades and generations to come, although obviously we hope that people will have the option to go home safely.
Okay, it's been good to talk to both of you, Lewis Turner and Marwa Hashim. And Marwa, I understand the difficulties and I understand the challenges threading the needle between your humanitarian work and the political realities. It's been great to have you on the program. Thanks so much.